We Saved You a Seat is sponsored by the Oklahoma Family Network. Oklahoma Family Network focuses on supporting families of children and youth with special health care needs and disabilities, as well as families who have children with a mental health or behavioral health diagnosis. Oklahoma Family Network provides families with emotional support, resource navigation, parent-to-parent engagement opportunities, and wants to ensure quality health care for all children and families by building strong and effective family-professional partnerships. Welcome to the sixth and final release of my conversation with Salena King-Coughlin. As an educator and researcher, Salena digs into the numbers of Oklahoma families who are tied to maternal morbidity. She shares with us ideas and additional ways to plan or advocate when you truly feel like you have exhausted all advocacy avenues. If you've missed any of the first episodes, please find the description and follow the links provided to hear the first 5 episodes of our conversation. You will want to get caught up. Thank you for listening to our final release of my conversation with Salena. So you were actually discharged with a drain. I mean, they weren't able to remove it while you were there. So you still had follow-up appointments even after you were better. I
Yeah.
mean, whew. I mean, the toll that this has taken on your body, even, after you were so-called taken care of. I mean, I just am thinking through all of the preventive things that could have.
All the places that they could have done something differently that would have changed, our whole course, right? And that's really the piece that, I just made an infographic, maternal mortality in Oklahoma for rural people. And they, in 2024, they found that 78% of maternal deaths in Oklahoma were preventable. I could have been in that statistic. That is almost 80% of women who died in our state could have been prevented. And I can give you about 30 times mine could have been. And I didn't die. And I know that there have to be that for so many other people. And those numbers and those things are what keep me awake at night, right? Like this was released on the 2024 data. This story happened in 2024. This is not like a far off. This didn't happen to someone 20 years ago, which it did, right? It's happening today, now.
Yes,
And
that is what I cannot push or convey enough, is that it still happens today. It
Mhm.
still is happening today. Identifying in families who are willing to share their near miss stories is so important to the process and changing the culture and helping physicians and nurses understand maternal health better. And so
Yeah,
I
but
that's a,
so many more are dying. The verbiage of that was so helpful for me. And I heard it on the Birth Trauma Mama podcast, which is why I know podcast like they're so powerful, right? Because truly that podcast and listening to other people's stories helped bring me back to life. Because I felt like, as we've talked about, so many things went wrong for me that I thought I'm just so weird. Like nobody experiences what I've experienced. This must be me being a trauma magnet, or this is has to be the story is so crazy that it has to be rare. And what I learned after joining this community of people fighting maternal mortality and morbidity is that it's not. What happened to me is commonplace. And that's why the nurses and the physicians seem to be so cavalier because it's just what they deal with every day. And so they're missing these things. But that verbiage of being a near miss was really helpful for me to understand the severity of what happened, even because it's hard sometimes because I'm alive and physically my body has healed, right? Like I have some nerve pain and I've got some lasting stuff, but I am alive and I'm walking and I'm holding and my baby's safe. Um, and so it's hard for me to go back and think this almost wasn't what happened. It was nearly missed. All of these moments that I am having right now were nearly missed because of this. And so I think that verbiage is really important to name and also to just have as a reminder of this is a negative outcome because I am still dealing with the traumatic side effects. It is not just my body and my, people say all the time, healthy baby, and that does matter. But I also like what happens to the mom matters. And I am forever changed. And I study trauma and attachment. And so intergenerational trauma, this is something that now it never lived in my line, right? No one in my family had had this trauma. Nobody had almost died from having a baby. And now this is something that is a part of our story in my lineage. And intergenerationally, when Sophia, if she chooses later to have a baby, I will be terrified for her safety. I will, that fear of almost losing her changes how I parent. It changes how I view doctors. It changes everything. And those are the things that are hard to quantify, but they are the things that are going to be so costly to our system. If we could just prevent those from happening, we would have healthier, happier, thriving individuals who don't have to have all of these, mental health advocacy and all of this stuff that's happening. Maternal morbidity and mortality are so costly when we're thinking about long-term effects for generations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said it so well. And I know in my initial introduction, I said that we had a positive outcome. And by no means do
Oh, I know.
I think that this is the best, outcome that could have happened, because so many things could have been changed, to create a much better scenario for you
Mm.
in all the ways. And so I hope that your voice is heard by so many people. Um, in your thoughts, and kind of as we're kind of wrapping up in closing thoughts, what are some tips that you would give families on that advocacy piece? How,
Mm.
you with all of the wonderful pieces of your life still weren't listened to. So what are some tips that you would say, here, don't negotiate on any of these things?
Well, what I really want listeners to hear, and families and mothers, is your body is data. You know yourself, you know your baby, even when they're in your womb, you know when something is off, and feelings of doom, feelings of anxiety, those are not quote unquote normal. Your body is talking to you, and it is okay to look a doctor in the face and say, I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate your expertise, but this is my body, and I want care now. And I want this test. I want this done. If you know something is off, that is data. They should be taking that in and saying, my patient is saying something is wrong. Let's figure it out. And I think that, as you mentioned, I had all these protective factors. My sister-in-law's a surgeon, my education, my family, my friends. And I was still labeled as anxious, difficult, emotional because they, people love to classify mothers as irrational, hysterical, anxious, difficult when you're just advocating for yourself. And if you see any red flags like that in your doctor, I also would love to urge you to understand that you can leave mid-pregnancy. You are not stuck with the first doctor you chose. You can leave if you don't like the care you're receiving. This is a service. You are paying for a service to be treated as someone who matters, to be given evidence-based treatment, And you can advocate for that by just saying, give me this or I will leave. You can also say, if you won't give me this, document it in my chart and I want to see it written out that you are refusing care. And for doctors and nurses who maybe have been in the field for a really long time, who see a lot of things, I understand that this is your day to day. And there may be places where people are being anxious or there is nothing wrong. But wouldn't you rather take the extra time with your patient, listen to them, test their concerns, and find out it's nothing, then dismiss them, disregard them, and find out it's everything? If I could go back and redo anything, I would get a doula and I would have them with me because I wholeheartedly believe that if I had had a doula, they would have said, we're doing intervention now. At 35 weeks, at 36 weeks, at 37 weeks, like there would have been a time where they would have said, we don't agree with, like, there's something off with your doctor. Let's get you a new doctor. Or like, let me talk to your doctor, you know? And so if you can get a doula and the Medicaid allowing them to be reimbursed is so, so, so beautiful and so important because we know that finances are a barrier for people. And I am just so grateful that that work is being done and pushed forward because I believe that if we could do the data, which I know there is data and research being done, but I would love to do it in Oklahoma, and see how doulas really impact maternal morbidity and mortality. And also, here is my other piece, right? This is a women are in danger when they're pregnant, right? We know that. We know that being pregnant can cause medical complications. And I don't ever want to get it twisted that I think women we will have no morbidity or no mortality, right? That's going to happen because bad things happen and we don't always have a reason. My biggest thing is I want to ensure that people have someone advocating for them in their corner for the preventable things, right? And that communication piece, I think, is a wonderful space that a doula could fit in, where no one's saying that a doula is a doctor, but they can come in and they can say, hey, this is what's happening. You know, for me, an example I could think of is when Sophia was intubated and all of that was happening, a doula could have said, hey, your baby just needs a little extra care. Here's what's going on, and you're doing such a good job, mom. And it's okay for you to feel detached. And even though I study bonding and attachment, and I know that it's normal for trauma to shut off that part of your body, I felt like a terrible person because it was so hard for me to connect at the beginning. And all of these things were taken away from me. And if there's just one person in the medical sphere, a doula or an advocate, to come in and give that, even when the morbidity and the mortality happens, that psychological traumatic piece that I'm talking about being dismissed and feeling like I don't matter, would go away. So I am a huge advocate for doulas, and I wholeheartedly wish that I had a doula. And I've made the decision after all of this to not have any more children. I have a perfect child who is okay, but I don't even know if I could because of my infection, but I'm not going to. So if I were to ever have another one, I would absolutely, but I've made that decision that that is not a risk that I'm willing to take because of what we went through. So,
I think that is an extension to the health complications is that we have smaller family units because
mhm.
health complications that could have been prevented are limiting women from having children, future children. And
Yeah,
and
100%.
I see that from the NICU standpoint too, the NICU, you know,
hmm
moms come in and their experience inside the NICU, they're like, I can't do that again. I
hmm
cannot have that trauma and to be that scared ever again in my entire life. So I'm done. I'm not going to do it.
hmm
So
Yep. And that's where, unfortunately, you know, I always wanted more. I'm the oldest of four, but I've had lots of therapy and conversations about if I die, I am leaving behind Sophia now, right? And there's no way I could, there's no world where I could get pregnant and not be affected by what happened to me, right? Because it was so traumatic on multiple layers that I could work through all of those. And the mom that Sophia would get while I was pregnant would never be the mom that she's been used to. And I feel like so much has already been taken from her because of what happened to me, because I wasn't able to be the mom I would have been, because I was dealing with so many first physical and then mental, like PTSD, postpartum depression, attachment. We couldn't breastfeed. I mean, there were so many pieces of the mom that I wanted for her, um, that were taken, and I could never do that again. Also, I now have a whole different view on you're not guaranteed anything, right? I just can't go. I can't take that risk on me, on my another potential child, on the NICU. There would just be it just is not for me. And it is something that was taken,
Yeah.
that desire.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that's
Yeah.
a hard conclusion to come to,
Hmm.
and not
Yeah.
something that you are taking
And I don't
lightly.
even think that I want to know what I'm missing. Like, and I know that that's like a wild thing to say out loud, but I I don't want to know. What, like, I already know that it's such a loss, but because she was my first, I don't know what that moment feels like when they first come out and they're healthy and they're breathing and you cuddle in the room and you see things on TikTok or wherever where they say, "Oh, just take me back to the first night in the hospital where it's just us and we're alone and it's this beautiful bonding." And I never had that. So while I can imagine that it's a loss and I know that my hopes of it and what I wanted out of it is I grieve, I don't know what I'm missing. And I don't, if, and this is a huge if everything went perfect, right? If I had a perfect pregnancy, perfect delivery, and then I did get to have that, what wave of grief would come over me at realizing what I lost with her? And so there are just lots of reasons, but I've talked to a lot of women who they choose the same. They don't you stop having that desire goes away because of the experience. And I absolutely think that it is contributing to our lower birth rates that we see. People are just having smaller families because and they're I mean my siblings don't want kids anytime because like there are so many layers of generations and people impacted by one person almost dying in birth. Me and my daughter impacted my friends, my family, everybody around me, people of birthing age, people married, people who've had kids. It changed, like we talked about, that intergenerational, it now lives in my line. That grief, that pain, it lives there. And we're 78% of that deaths that cause that are preventable in Oklahoma. And that is not even including morbidity. That's not including near misses like me. That is just deaths. Yeah.
And I don't imagine that we will have a lot of opportunities to share um, the mortality side. I think we're
Yeah.
going to have to just focus on the near misses and the
Hmm.
morbidity side of things, just so that we can
Yeah.
change and hopefully prevent some of that in the future. So, oof.
100%. Because that's, I mean, my husband struggles now
Mhm.
and I'm here.
Yeah.
I and healthy. One thing I really wanted to accomplish this year was finding a way to take the worst thing that ever happened to me and turning it into change in our system and fighting and advocating for people like me, and who are in different situations, just advocacy this is such a full circle moment for me to be able to come on a podcast that's aimed at Oklahoma maternal morbidity and mortality and talking about what happened to me, and then you taking it and turning it into this piece that maybe can really help make a change. And so this was kind of how I viewed it, as me holding space for that. And so it's like in a year, I've somehow found a way to do that. And I'm really proud of that. And that makes me feel good.
Salena, you should feel good and be incredibly proud of how you have articulated your story and shared with others. I will not let this conversation end without saying how grateful I am to Salena for sharing her story and experience. She's a wife, educator, infant mental health specialist, Oklahoman, and mom who wants to better her community and state for those giving birth. I know we are both hopeful that by Salena sharing her experience, it will provide awareness, education, and conversation to the topic of maternal morbidity and mortality, as well as support others who have experienced similar birth trauma and postpartum complications. We don't have all the answers, but I know we should all feel comfortable becoming part of the conversation and solution to help keep mothers and babies safe throughout pregnancy, delivery, and the postpartum period. On behalf of Salena and myself, I want to say thank you for listening to the hard conversation, describing what Salena and her family walked through. Every mom matters, and every life matters. Thank you for listening to this episode of We Saved You a Seat. Oklahoma Family Network promotes family-centered care and provides tools so families can make informed decisions, advocate for improved services, build connections among families, and serve as a trusted resource in health care of children and young adults. If you would like to become a supporting family or get in touch with another family, please contact Oklahoma Family Network at oklahomafamilynetwork.org or by calling 405-271-5072.